Greetings, everyone. My name is Dr. Jay Singh, and I'm the founder of Publication Academy, your online training partner for higher ed career advancement and professional development. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today for this installment of our Career Pathways series, Exiting Academia. Today, we have a fascinating interview with Dr. Julia Gray, who successfully transitioned from completing a PhD in adult education into the exciting industry vertical of policy advising. So let's get right into it. Over now to our amazing Publication Academy interviewer, Dr. Gertrude Nantra.
All right. Hi, everyone. Dr. G. Nantra here. And today I'm super excited to be interviewing Dr. Julia Gray. Welcome, Dr. Gray.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. I'm excited to have you. So let's start with your educational background and why you chose a career outside of academia.
Sure. So my educational background is quite varied. I did my undergrad many moons ago in theater. So I started off in the fine arts and I worked in professional theater for, over a decade. And at sort of towards my late 20s, I was continuing to do artistic work, but I shifted my work to be collaborating with scientists, folks in the health sciences. So it was at that point that I actually went back and did my MA, also in theater, and then moved into the social sciences. I did my PhD in education. And I wanted to do my PhD in education because I was interested to learn more about methodology, and social science theories, practices, and as well as, method, and really understanding and studying method. And what was the second part of your question?
Is why did you choose a career outside of academia?
Yeah, well, a lot of it was very practical. I, in many ways, had a very successful career as an academic in the sense that I published a lot. I enjoyed the publishing. I really enjoyed teaching. There was, in a way, no shortage of work, but it was the quality of the work that was frustratingly poor. And I, kind of being in a strange sort of niche as well, being an arts person in the health sciences. Right. It was very challenging to find something steady and regular that would really help me build the kind of lifestyle that I wanted to build and maybe would retire one day. And I had some very frustrating experiences, frankly, some very challenging experiences that left me feeling kind of despondent about my my future in the academy. And I thought, there are options. I came into the academy as someone with 10 years already of work experience under my belt. At the time I was doing my master's and my PhD, I had already worked in industry. And so I knew it was possible. And yeah, I mean, given sort of the confluence of those things, the knowing that, this isn't the kind of stability that I'm looking for. This isn't, I need to make more money, frankly, like in order to just pay my bills and retire one day. And that, I was frustrated. I don't have to live with the frustration of feeling like I have to be spinning my wheels trying to find work while being treated not very well.
Right. Yeah. And I think, there are people with stories like that where it's like, the treatment or maybe the work wasn't as stimulating anymore. So thanks for sharing that. Because I think that sometimes when people go through that, they think to themselves, well, at least I'm privileged to have a job in academia, right? And there's so many people that would love to be in my shoes. And so they rationalize things away. But thank you for sharing that. Thank you. So
well, and actually, if I can just jump in there, I mean, I had a lot of those thoughts as well, like, oh, I should feel so lucky. And people would tell me, you're so lucky. I did land a non-tenure track role, a teaching position. And in many ways, there was a lot that I loved about it. But when I really looked at like my life, like, is this the life I really want to be living? I thought, no, it really isn't. And I had to do a lot of soul searching about what are my values? What's the life I want to live? And how can I don't think I can live that if I stay here.
Very, very good. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. So what do you do? Describe what you do now, and what does a day-to-day look like?
Now I'm working as a senior policy advisor in the government. I'm here in Canada, and we have provinces, and so it's sort of like a state level government, or province level government. And my day to day is pretty varied. I do some research. It's not the same kind of research as academic research, but environmental scans. We work a lot with the ministry that I'm in with community partners. So doing research around what different community partners are doing to inform the kind of policy work that we're doing, meeting with folks in other ministries, sort of a lot of work around analysis and like framing of analysis. How do we want, and sort of narrative oriented work, like how do we want to think about this particular issue? What's the kind of policy that we're wanting to develop to try and address this issue?
Right.
How can we frame it so that it will be taken up by decision makers? That kind of thing.
Yeah, amazing. How did you find that job?
Great question. I found it through my network.
Okay.
I knew when I made the decision, okay, I got to make this change here. I was targeting several different sort of broad areas, including government. And I really just started talking to everyone that I knew. I'm looking to make a change. I'm not 100% sure what that's going to look like yet, but I'm looking to make a change. And these are some of the skills that I have. What do you think? What do you do? What do you think? And I happened to run into someone who was a long time friend that I had sort of, have kept in touch with over the years.
Yes.
Happened to run into him, and he worked in government. And he said, oh, there may be some hiring coming up. Why don't I connect you with folks in my in my branch and just help you with the networking piece. So yes, I met with some people in the branch, and 4 or 5 months later, when the job actually did come up, it took a long time. I applied and got an interview, and Bob's your uncle. Here I am.
Yeah. Something that's so interesting, Julia. So I always tell people to dig the well before you need it. And what I mean by that is your network is not going to pay off today and tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes it's a longtime friend. Sometimes it's somebody you knew from school. And because I've come across people who have told me they absolutely hate the term networking. They avoid it like the plague and everything. And I've always encouraged people to not give it the slimy salesman connotation it can have, but having the mindset that it's just relationship building, and it's not relationship building to get an end, but that at some point you could potentially tap into that. And I was having a conversation with somebody today, actually, and saying that in your network, that's why it's called a network, because you may know one person who knows another person, who knows another person, who knows about an opportunity. But if you don't have that first connection, then you don't have all those other connections. Or if you don't tap into that first connection, then you're not going to know about the opportunity that is at the fourth link. So having your network and tapping into it is so important. So that's a really great demonstration of that.
I love that. Yeah. And with this particular example, like I had no idea if this was going to pan out. Like I was also meeting with 18, maybe not 18, but I was meeting with other people and, trying to connect with their connections as well. And, all of this was kind of happening simultaneously. And it was many months later yes, I'd say probably 5 months when the job was actually posted, and then yes, another month for the interview, and then et cetera, et cetera. So
It takes
yes, it can take a long time, and you just never know.
Exactly, exactly. It takes time. I agree with you. When I was looking for jobs outside of the academy, it took some time. So
Yeah.
it's pretty normal. What transferable skills, you do policy, and for somebody watching this, they may be thinking, okay, but how do I take my research skills and then go work in the government? How do I take my writing skills and go? So what skills would you say have been helpful for you in this particular job?
Yeah, well, you've identified a couple there. The writing, absolutely, being able to kind of think through writing and analyze through writing, and being able to be flexible in your writing, adapting your approach and your style depending on, the document or the piece that it is that you're writing. Like I write differently in a briefing note than I do in a PowerPoint, than I do in a professional email, etc. And yeah, wrapped up in that, the analysis piece. How do we know there's a particular issue, we know we have to address it in a different way. How do I take all of this research or all of this data or information that we've collected and kind of pull it all together and see whatever the issue is in a new way so that we can try and address it through policy? That is a sophisticated skill, and something that folks from the arts, the humanities, and the social sciences are very well versed in, especially when the data might seem, it's not hard data. It's often like qualitative, people's experiences, things that community partners are sharing about what they're thinking they need or where there might be a problem. And so to be able to sort of take all of this information and then try and analyze it in order to target it towards something very specific like policy is an important skill. And learning about what policy is and how it works and the workings of government, that can absolutely all be learned. Like whatever the new industry is, there's absolutely always going to be new things to be learned, but those skills are definitely transferable. And the last thing I would say is the people skills, the relationship piece, working with folks whose work ties into what it is that you're doing, but you don't necessarily understand what they're doing, to be able to sort of imagine and read into where they're coming from in order to be able to collaborate and work together. Is a very important skill that I certainly developed through grad school and through my work in academia. And, the last thing I'll say actually is mentorship. We have had a couple of interns, we've had a couple of co-op students work in our branch, and it's been really fun to mentor them and sort of imagine like, oh yeah, when I was 22, what did I need to know about how to work in an office, or how to, what's professional etiquette, or where do I find particular documents on the shared drive, or whatever, like all of that sort of day-to-day stuff that people, younger folks or newer folks to the professional world don't know how to access. And so there is that opportunity, which I wasn't quite expecting and was a kind of a nice surprise.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. That's amazing. And I think, we need good mentors, like just piggybacking off of that last point. We need good mentors, because if your mentor can make or break what you think about a profession for life.
Yeah, right.
So having that and having supportive mentors, whether it's in academia or outside, that's so crucial. And knowing that within academic settings, we do sometimes, maybe as a PhD student, you mentored some undergrads or mentored some like people who are not, other people. That's a really powerful skill that we don't sometimes realize, or teaching, right? We don't sometimes realize can be so valuable outside of an academy. You talked about, I want something you said kind of triggered a question in my mind, and you talked about you can learn policy, right? So somebody that's really new to policy though, what kind of resources would you recommend to them to go learn about policy? Where do you go learn about policy?
Well, that's a good question. I will say the first few months on the job were like drinking from the fire hose, definitely feeling overwhelmed. People use all these acronyms and lingo, and it is a particular kind of culture. Oh my God. Very tiring. And sometimes you just need to be transparent. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. You need to help me out here. But in terms of government and policy, I would say, learning about how, as much as you can, about how government works. Like, what is the process of, not even just like how are people voted into office, but like how does a bill become a law? How do ministers or policy decision makers work with the public service? Like, how do they work with the policy analysts? How does that happen? What's the funding cycle for government, et cetera? Like, those sort of basic things can help to kind of acclimatize you to and orient you to that world. And I think then getting into now that I'm in there, there are those trainings that are available to me. Wow. And I have had access to, what's a Treasury Board submission, or, what's the budget cycle, et cetera. Yes. And I'm learning about all that stuff. But if it is something that you're interested to do, you can do some of that work in advance.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. What would you say was that, well, you had talked about the fact that before you went to your PhD, you had worked, you had done a lot of work, which I think, is really valuable. The question I want to ask is, was it hard making that decision to not work in academia?
Yes, very.
What was the hardest part about it?
I would say they're kind of intertwined. Two things. One was recognizing that merit doesn't really matter. That was sort of very disheartening that, I can be awesome and win all the awards and get all the grants and be outperforming my colleagues in terms of, publications and blah, blah, blah. Oh, and it doesn't really matter in terms of like just landing a job, not even just, doing anything super fancy. I just needed a job to be able to support the very cool work that I was already doing, really. So that was coming to that sort of realization was hard. And then once having actually made the decision, having to sort of like I had been moving along on a particular way and training myself and trying to sort of work within this academic culture and understand it quite intimately for well over a decade. And then to have to say, okay, I know these skills are valuable. I know it. I do not doubt it at all. How do I actually take that and move it over here and kind of engage with other people and pitch myself in certain ways and revamp my LinkedIn and learn how to speak in different ways so that folks could understand what I was doing or how I was, that I really was committed to leaving that world. That was hard. Yeah, that was very hard. But I did it.
Yeah, you did it. And I think that sounds like, it's something similar to me, where once you made the decision, you're like, okay, but what do I do now?
Yeah, right.
Now that I don't want to be a tenured professor or, a researcher at a big institution, what do I do now? So sometimes just figuring out what you want to do is also such a big piece of the puzzle. And it can take a toll on you emotionally as well, because you're like, if I'm not this, then because you're losing some part of your identity, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Agreed. Yeah. Having invested so much. And to not think of it as a lost investment, like, oh, I've come so far, I should keep going. But like, that's still you. It's still there in you. And you just need to shift. I say, you just need to shift. No,
It takes work,
It's
but
really
I agree
hard.
with you. Yeah, it takes work, but I agree with you that you do need to make the shift. But once you realize, this is why I always tell people, like when you choose a job outside of academia, realize that career switching is hard. It's what it is.
Yeah,
It's hard.
yeah.
But once you accept that it's hard, and I think it's easier for you to, it's better, you're easier on yourself versus having like stars in your eyes and then just being punched in the face by the realities, right?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah, yeah.
And actually, that's where the networking, to bring back the networking thing, that's where I think the networking thing too can be really, really helpful. I've found people to be incredibly open to my transparency about like, I need to make a change and I don't know what that is yet.
Yeah.
Can I talk to you about what you do? And could I imagine myself in what you do? And
Right.
people sharing very, very warmly about what they do and trying to hear what I do and having a bit of a back and forth. They're not going to fix my problem, but it did help me kind of imagine, is that an area where I could see myself working, or is that an area where my skills actually could apply, etc. And it helped me imagine what a future could look like for me, for myself.
That's right. Amazing, amazing. So, I've loved that conversation. We're coming towards the end of it. What advice would you give to somebody? Last pieces of, of wisdom, of Julia Gray wisdom that you would give, that you would give to somebody that wants to potentially work in government or policy?
I would say, to shift your question a little bit, I would say once you make that decision that you want to leave, you want to be kind to yourself. You want to like eat your veggies, have your shower every morning or whatever, brush your teeth, equip yourself with good people, work to live a good full life as you're making that transition, because you don't know how long it's going to take, and it is going to be hard, and it's hard to imagine in what ways that it's going to be hard. And in terms of working in government, I would say one of the reasons I chose government was because in Ontario, anyway, where I live, it gives you a lot of flexibility. So once you're into the system, you can move around into different types of roles or in different ministries. It gives you a lot of options. And so you can think a little bit about, that was something that I really appreciated. I could have some stability, but then I could still kind of try different types of things. And so for folks who are thinking about government, you can look into your local government and how does it work? Are those kinds of options available? Or is it, each local government is just so different.
Different, yeah. Well, yeah, that's very, very helpful. Be kind to yourself. Take care of yourself. And it's like a marathon. So just kind of get to run that marathon and don't get discouraged on the way.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Gray. Those are such wise words. Thank you for chatting with me today.
Thank you for inviting me.